Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Keep Up with Pryme. My name is Laura Andradas. I'm marketing lead at Pryme Global, and together with Aske Holst, product manager at Pryme Global, we will walk you through some of our application enhancements from the last release, and we will also take a deep dive into project planning with Gantt. At the end of the session, we're going to leave some time for the Q&A. So let's start. And we're starting with AI, since we have new chatbots, which are AI-driven. You can find those on both the Pryme Ads Docs site and also on our help desk site. So we really encourage you to start using them because it's a very easy way to find out answers to your product questions for both Pryme apps and Progresso's advanced projects. What's new for advanced projects? We have seen further integration with the Dynamics 365 Sales CRM. Apart from this, at the Gantt chart level, we have included new fields, and now there's also the option of exporting it as a PDF. Now you're also able to create project permissions from templates, and we have included a year timeline for both the resource planner and the individual project resource board. Last but not least, we have extended the timesheet and invoice comments length. And moving forward to our Pryme apps, now there's a new assisted setup wizard for the Pryme CIS and RCT Tax Retention. And we also encourage you to check the product video on the PC product video section for this product. Thanks a lot, and we'll see each other at the end of the presentation. And now I hand it over to Aske, who will do the actual demo. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. And so let's start out with having a look at the chatbots. They are not really a product feature, but I thought I would show them out anyway, because I think they are quite nice in to see what they can do. And they can help you out a lot with easy questions or even hard questions. So we have two different chatbots. One is available on our help desk page, and it shows up in the bottom right corner here. You can open it up and you can ask it basically anything. It suggests the kind of question you can ask it. But even if you have a long query, something that you wonder about, try to paste it in and see what it gets. And so you might have a question and you ask it, and it will pull from the documentation. The Pryme Support chatbot has been trained on approximately 700 pages of documentation and transcripts of videos we've done. And so it should know quite a lot of the products. And important here is that the Pryme Support bot knows about both Progresses and the Pryme apps and can even answer questions that are related to both those areas. So before submitting a ticket, try to ask the bot. You might get a question in just a few seconds. And usually it will always also give you some further documentation you can get to read. The other bot we have is our Pryme specific chatbot, which you can find on the Pryme's doc site. This only answers questions related to Pryme apps. So it kind of makes sense to have it together with the Pryme docs because they are focused on the Pryme apps. And so it works in the same way, and you can ask it questions either about product functionality, but also generally what apps do you have available, how do it work, where can I find them, all these things. And it will try to answer quickly and efficiently. And if you're not satisfied with the answer, please let us know by checking this was not helpful. Then we can see it and see if we can do something to train the bot better on our knowledge base. Next up, we have features for advanced projects. There are some new changes to the integration with Dynamics 365 Sales. That is to cover some scenarios where you have opportunities transferred from Dynamics 365 sales and you don't want those to be integrated. And so you can use this field of decision maker to control whether an opportunity is to be created as a project in advanced projects or not. Next up, we have some features on the Gantt chart. We have a couple of new fields, and we have an export as PDF feature. So if I go back in here, show in our demo environment, if I open up a Gantt chart for a project, I'll select my demo 1 project. We will see the Gantt chart. The Gantt chart has actually changed a little bit in the way it looks. We've changed the graphics slightly to be a bit more of a modern experience. The new thing is that there's a lot of new columns out here with additional information. So things like budgeted cost, actual cost, percent completed, budget versus actual, etc. So you can use this more as a project plan. And drill down, of course, works on these fields as well. So you can click on them and you can get to a list of the entries that are behind, just like you're used to with flow fields in Business Central. There is also now a save as PDF option. So you can use this to get a PDF. You can, of course, decide the size of paper and the orientation. For small projects, I like this fit to 1 page wide option, so you don't get something that is huge. But if you have a huge project, you might want it to span multiple pages. And so from this, you get a PDF that you can then share with another team or your customers, etc. Next up, we have project permissions. They are now templated, and there's some additional features to create the project permissions. So from a project, you can now create project permissions with templates. You can also see the complete list of project permissions across all projects. That requires that you have some admin rights. You can look at a specific resource and see what permissions they have across different projects. So open up the project permission list from a resource card and see that Cassie has approval permissions on the demo 5 project. He has task list permission on the demo 1 project, etc. If you're setting up new projects or amending existing projects, you can use this feature to also use templates. So you can either assign permissions with a new get resources function. So I could say here, I want everybody in a certain team to have timesheet permissions on my project. And so let's say that's everybody from the app development team. Then it automatically adds that as a list of resources. So instead of picking those out one by one, I can use this function. I can also set up templates. So from the setup menu here, template setup and project templates, I can create a template. And in this case, if we have a look at this, we will see that that was not a project template. It should be a permission template, of course. It was a project permission template, sorry. So I have my project permission template. The template lines here are that Cassie should get approval, project managers should get task list, and technicians should get timesheet approval. And I've saved this as a template, meaning I can go to any project I create, go into permissions, and actually let's take another one where I don't have anything. That makes it a bit easier to see. So in here, I'll go in, get template, select my template, team 1, say OK, and then it applies that template. So trying to make things a little bit easier to work with when using permissions. For the resource planner, we now have a year timeline that can be used both on the regular resource planner, the individual project resource, and the project resource board. So if I go into my resource board here, we have the regular resource board. And I, by default, have week, 2 weeks, month, and 4 weeks. The new thing is that I can go in under view templates, and a bit hidden in here actually, and go to timelines. You can also search for this and find the timelines available. And here I can now add a new year timeline. Can give it a name. I'll call it year. I need to enable it in order for it to work. We can see it gets now number 0, meaning it's first in sequence. I'll actually put it last in my sequence, so it comes last in the menu. And with that, I now have a year option that allows me to see planning for the whole calendar year. In this case, from January through December, and I can see who is planned for what in each individual month. For companies working with planning of big blocks of time, maybe even spanning multiple months, this can be a very nice view. Do be aware that you cannot use this to replan. So if I try to take something and say, well, I want to drag this into another month, it'll say dragging and resizing is not allowed on a year timeline. The reason for this is the date complexity. If I have something starting on the 15th of October and ending on the 31st of October, if I move that to November, what date should it get? It cannot end on the 31st of November because that date doesn't exist, etc. If I drag something, it becomes very hard to control in a meaningful way what the dates will be when you drag across month because they have different lengths. So if you're going to move something, just double click it and change the dates in here. That's a solution. Last of all, we have expanded timesheet and invoice comments. This has been a recurring request. When you work with timesheets and if you work with invoice comments, not everybody does that. But if you do, then you can now not only add invoice comments the regular way as I can here, I can put in some comments. But if I wanted a really long text in here, in the past, I would have to create additional lines, each limited to 80 characters. And if I have a long text to paste in, that becomes a bit of a hassle. Now I can click on the 3 drill down dots here, and I get a big text field where I can put in however much text I would like. So there is an option to work with really long comments, pasting in something from an email or something like that. And this applies in all places where you can work with these comments. That could be in the timesheet, it could be in time approval, it could be in invoice suggestion, etc. It's available in all those places. Lastly, not for progressors, but in this case for the CIS functionality, we now have an assisted setup wizard. This is part of our push to enable onboarding as quickly as possible. And it is simply a way to go into assisted setup when you've installed the CIS app, if you need it, of course. And there is now a new option to set up CIS RCT. It will guide you through the setup experience. You will select what tax scheme this is applying to. For the UK, that would be CIS. For Ireland, it would be RCT. You select the submission method. Do you want manual submission? Do you want direct integration with HMRC? How do you want to validate your subcontractors, manual or online? What date would you like this to start? I'll start the 6th of October this month. And then it'll suggest you the posting groups that will be applying in most cases. You can make changes here if you want to, but in most cases, it's just a matter of clicking next. What should be the defaults? Again, most cases, click next. What categories should you have? Well, you need a materials category if you're using CIS, so we're suggesting that for you. So click next. And maybe even here, you have your product posting groups. It suggests you something. And again, most of the time you can go through with next, unless you have some very special cases. The only step where you actually need to do something is to select your GL account, because we cannot select that for you. So you will have to put those in yourself. And with that, you're basically finished with the setup of CIS in just a few minutes. And so this basically concludes what we have as new features for this release. The last step today is a walkthrough of more of a deep dive project planning with the Gantt chart. And so I will switch into that. So project planning with the Gantt chart. Let's open up a new project or an existing project and have a look at the Gantt chart. So I can open up the Gantt chart from the project menu, Gantt chart, and I can see a Gantt chart. And in here, I actually already have my Gantt chart, and I have some start dates and end dates. And the start dates and end dates are simply dates on the task, this saying when should that task start and when should it end. In this case, this task should start on the 7th and end on the 14th. I can make changes directly by clicking the date and selecting a new date, or I can drag them in here, whatever you find most comfortable. You can also relate the tasks, and the default setup is that relations are not enforced, meaning if I make a relation between the customer meeting and the proposal, there is no enforcement that is actually the proposal starts after the customer meeting has ended. So if I want that feature, and most cases you would want that feature, you need to open up your setup, and there's some setups we should address here. The first one is the project setup, and there you have some settings. And let me go back into project setup. And we have a setting down here under the budget part where we say enforce dependencies in Gantt. This one, in most cases, you would like to enable. That's an important step. That means that when we get back into our Gantt chart, it will start enforcing our relations here. So if I now move my customer meeting, it will also move the proposal. And so I can start connecting things up. And as I move one thing, the next thing moves, etc. And that could be one way or the other. Of course, if I move the proposal, that doesn't drag along the customer meeting. So this is general Gantt chart planning. There's nothing special. Also be aware that you can actually make relations on the high-level tasks. So you don't want to do detailed planning on the lower level tasks. You can do them on these roll-up tasks as well. With this planning, I can now visualize what that means when I come to resource planning. And this is where it really ties in, because I now have dates for customer meeting and proposal and analysis. And if I'm going to do resource planning, I would probably use either the resource board or the resource planner. If I open up the resource planner for my software project, we will see that there are some areas here that are marked as red or slightly red. And that means that this is outside of the timeline that we defined in the Gantt chart. So for the customer meeting, this is inside, but for this, it is outside. If I switch to a month view, it becomes a bit more clear that here we have a block of what is the expected dates for the customer meeting to take place. And as I move along, we can see now I have a block of time here for the proposal. It doesn't preclude me to plan resources outside of that window, but if I do, then of course, I'm outside of my planning as I did it in my Gantt chart. So this is supposed to be a help for planning purposes. You can do something similar in the resource board. So if I'm planning in here, I can of course plan for a task. And so let me just, most of the cases you would import a budget, of course, and you would have a starting point. But let me create just a work assignment in here for our software project. And for a customer meeting, I'll plan for 8 hours of work for Cassie in here. And here, as I create this, I can now see that the planned date for this task is to be between the 7th and the 15th. And with putting this on the 8th, I'm definitely within those parameters. So this is all good. And this shows up nicely. But what happens if I now move this out to a point further out in the future? So I move it out here. I don't see any difference here, but now this is planned too late. If I was to open this up, I can see that now this is showing as red because it's planned to start on the 18th, but we said that we should end this task no later than the 15th. Is there any way I can make this more visible? Yes. I can work with the coloring rules and create a coloring rule, and I'll create a standard coloring rule in here. And I will set this up to make special colors if something is late or if it is early. And my colors would be that if it is late, then I want it to be scarlet, and if it is too early, it might be this egg color, yellow. But what are the conditions? Well, something being late means that the end date is after the task ends. So that would be my condition here. Something early would be that the start date of something is before the task starts. So start before task start. If that is true, then we are early. And so these are my rules. Late, the end is before the task ends, or early, the start is before the task starts. With this, I should now get some coloring, and we can see that this turns red because it's too late. If I move it here, then it turns yellow because it's too late. If I move it in between, it turns green because it is in the right window. And so this also, again, shows up in my resource planner, which is the per project planning. So watching this in here, we should see that, yes, this is green because it is within the window. If we look at a longer timeline, we can see that this is where the end is. So what we saw in the resource planner is I moved it before this date or I moved it after this date. But we visualize it because we only look at one project, so we can color code this. I can also go back to my Gantt chart and see where my resources are now planned. And looking at this, we can see for the customer meeting, this is the timeline we set aside for it. And I have this orange bar saying I have work assignments from the 9th to the 10th. So that also shows up in here. So it all connects. You can do your planning in the Gantt chart, you can visualize it in the resource planner or the resource board, and you can then see what that means when you get back to the Gantt chart. There is one small thing I want to mention, and that is if you are working with budgets and the Gantt chart, there is an option to connect the budget to the planning we do in here. The way you would do that is with a setting, again in project setup, where you can set it to move the budgets with task. And so the option we currently have is same number of days. What that means is if I move my task in the Gantt chart or on the task card, that actually works the same way. If I were to move my meeting here 1 day ahead, then it would also move the budget I've set aside for customer meetings 1 day ahead. Now, 1 day doesn't make a change, but if you're making big changes, that could automatically move your budget. That can be very powerful. It can also have unforeseen consequences that people think that they are just changing the high-level plan, and in reality, they're changing the budget without knowing it. And especially as you can also enforce that changes to your budget drive changes in your resource planning, you could have a chain effect of moving the planning in the Gantt chart would move the budget entries. Moving the budget entries would move the resource planning. So the resource planning would, in effect, move along with the planning in the Gantt chart. I wouldn't generally recommend it. I think it is giving too much power to the system. I personally prefer a bit of control over how you budget and how you plan, but you can enable that if you want to. And this concludes our deep dive into planning with the Gantt chart.
Thank you very much for attending, and we'll see each other for the next release. Have a very good day. Goodbye.
Bye.